Welcome to MSP Unplugged, episode number 6, Adapting to the Current Market. I'm your host, Jeff Halash. This is our live show where we discuss the different ways to run your IT business, whether it's managed services, consulting, break fix, or anything in between. Let me introduce the co-hosts. We have Rich Freeman from ChannelPro Network. Rich, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good to have you here. And also joining him, his I don't know, you guys, the team, the dynamic duo, but you also have Matt Whitlock, also from ChannelPro Network. Matt, how you doing?
Hello, Jeff. Great to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Good to have you guys. All right. At the beginning of the show, what we normally do is we have a tip or a story that we could learn from. So, Matt, since you seem to make stuff up on the fly, I'm going to kick it over to you and see what you got.
You want a tip, you said, or you just
tip
make
or
up a story?
Just make up, whatever you think might help the audience. Maybe just a piece of wisdom, something that you could.
So if I could make one recommendation to enhance everyone's lives, I would say you want to check out the 5-minute roundup that Rich Freeman did with Eric Simpson, which he does on YouTube. Not the one that you just posted, Rich, because you posted one I think yesterday, right?
Probably, yeah.
So whatever the week before that. It is 18 minutes long, and it is well worth it. It will give you a nice laugh. Rich, would you like to tell them about it?
Well, I'll tell them about it, and there is a lesson to be learned here as well. And the lesson to be learned is if you are, say, visiting Matt Whitlock at his home where he is seated now, and you need to record an episode of more or less anything there, don't tell him this 3 days in advance. And give him a lot of time to figure out ways to mess with you on camera, because he's pretty good at coming up ways to mess with you. And this is what you will see. So the dynamic for those who are new to us, Matt and I work at ChannelPro, but we also co-host the ChannelPro Weekly podcast. And the dynamic between the two of us is he is continually trying to shake me up, and I am continually trying to not be shaken, right? Like this. And now I'm in his territory there, and I'm doing this show. He's not on. He has nothing to do basically but shake me up. And so we're talking. I'm on there with my co-host Eric Simpson. We're talking about all this really serious cybersecurity stuff. And Matt and his daughter and his son, they're kind of coming in there. They're just putting layers of clothing on me. It's they're in Illinois. It's cold. They said, "You look cold, Rich." And you just have to kind of watch it unfold and watch me kind of try to stay on target through this. By the end of the show, 18 minutes or whatever, I've got like 5 blankets and a hat and 2 scarves, and I'm talking about cybersecurity.
The theme was Rich is cold. Well worth it. Please go check that out. And Jeff, if I may, for those, can I tell people about ChannelPro Weekly for those who may not be familiar with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, go.
So Rich and I, we do a podcast for ChannelPro called ChannelPro Weekly. We're on episode 135, I believe, next week. So it's been around for quite a while. It's Rich and I, and these days, awesome guest host, Jeff Halash, was a guest of ours on episode 130. We also have some other greats like Tim Sobel, and we've had Dave Seibert, and a lot of great guest interviews. So, for example, on our last show, we had the CEO of Huntress Labs on. We've also talked to the CCO of HP Global. Rich, help me out here with other interviewees.
Well, we spoke when I was in town with you. We spoke with someone from Poly about opportunities in workplace optimization. We've had some other interesting security conversations. We got the CEO of Scout Cybersecurity on the show, I remember, and there are some great ones coming up. I believe it's this week's show. We've got the Chief Product Officer from Auvik on to talk about trends in networking and network diversity, as they call it at Auvik, and how hard it's getting for channel pros to manage all these different products from different vendors these days. So the interview segment part of our show has really gotten to be a regular component and a good component.
And I'll point out too, there's a lot of channel podcasts out there, a lot of resources that you can watch and listen to, and listen to a variety of them as Rich and I do as well. But we like to say that ours is it's a good mix of knowledge and insight and information, but we also try to keep it fun and light and entertaining. It's not the shortest show in the world, so I do recommend the audio version for regular listening. But we do a video version on YouTube as well. But it's a little longer, but put it on the background while you listen and learn and laugh along with us, because it's a good time. As Jeff knows, it's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's good hanging out with you guys. Rich, real quick too, why don't you tell us what the 5-minute roundup actually is?
So that is, and this goes right to what Matt was talking about, because you would think, based on the title, the 5-minute roundup is about 5 minutes long, right? But it tends to be more like 15, because anything I'm associated with is going to run along, apparently. But it's
we might have lost him. So while Rich is having an aneurysm or a stroke there on screen, I will go ahead. Go ahead and say. So he does this with Eric Simpson, the great Eric Simpson, author, and done a lot of books and a lot of does a lot of speaking at events. They do this roundup every week where they kind of do a quick breakdown, not necessarily so much of news, but they pick a couple topics that will be of interest to MSPs and channel pros out there, and to just give a few quick tips and insights. Hopefully, he would have done it better justice than me, Jeff, but that's kind of what it is. But Eric, for those who are not familiar with Eric Simpson, he is he's a brilliant guy, great MSP, and I don't know how much of that he does these days, but he's well worth listening to and listening. So.
That's over on YouTube, right?
What's that?
That's over on YouTube?
Yes, that is also on. That's YouTube only. I think they want to try to put an audio version out here in the near future. But the original goal was to make it 5 minutes, and it's 10-ish.
Now,
well, it's kind of like how we say Channel Pro Weekly was supposed to be a weekly, which it mostly is these days. But we had some spots in the past where it was really hard getting, with Rich's travel schedule, doing a show every week. So we would just say, well, hey, it's Channel Pro Weekly, meaning that we will put the show out in one of the 52 weeks of the year. So it comes in a weekly version. Hey, Rich is back.
So that was interesting.
Yeah.
My computer just completely died, and I could just shut down. And I mean, it's I'm on a laptop. It's quite hot. So I don't know if I don't know, but boy, that was interesting.
Wow, crazy.
You froze, disappeared, and then
it just went dead. I had to reboot just now.
Wow. Okay.
So I tried to summarize the 5-minute roundup, Rich, but I did a terrible job. So why don't you give them the one sentence overview?
It is co-hosted by myself and Eric Simpson, who is a consultant to MSPs. We get together for what should be 5 minutes, but is actually closer to 15, and we talk about one big story in the news. Eric then provides a tip, a business growth tip that he might provide to his customers, and then we'll kind of take a look at something sort of fun in the news as well. So it's on video, it's on YouTube, and just a fun, quick way to listen to two guys gab about stuff that's going on in the industry.
Very cool. All right, sounds good. All right, and I guess my tip for the week is, I don't know. Actually, I'll tell a little story. So I went out to a customer's house, and this customer had gotten a hold of me through basically voicemail and sent out an email, and I got back with them, and I basically said, hey, they said they had a slow computer and they wanted me to check it out and all that kind of stuff. They wanted me to come out on site. I said, well, it's more expensive for me to come out on site. I said I charge $80 an hour, and it's from the time I get into my car to the time that I get back to my house. So time's ticking. And so I was like, I can probably do it remotely. You just need to clean up or whatever. It's like, well, we like to meet people. We're kind of a little old fashioned in that way. We want to meet people face to face. And I get that. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. So I go out on site, and I'm sitting here talking to this nice, a little bit older couple. And we're just they're telling me about their computer and all the things that they need cleaned up. And I'm like, yeah, we can do this. We can do that. No problem. And they kind of look at each other and they go, you feel good about this? Yeah, I feel good about this. I'm like, cool. She's like, so, we want to make sure you're compensated for your time and all that kind of stuff. I said, well, yeah, it's easy. I said, I charge $80 an hour from my door to back to my door. And she's like, she looks at me, big smile on her face. She goes, well, get the heck out of here then. I said, understood. I said, yeah, I said, that's why we'll get things started here. I said, you guys are comfortable. I'm going to get things going. I said, I see you got a big update that needs to be done on your computer anyways. So by the time I do my little bit of a cleanup and ship that off, I said I will go in and remote back in when I get home and finish it up. Because I said, you don't want to pay me to sit here and watch paint dry or grass grow or any of those types of things. But anyways, that was my story from this week. As a lot of people know, I really don't like to go out on site, but sometimes you got to make that first effort where you just get a hold of somebody and say, hey, meet them, look them in the eye, shake their hands, and all that kind of stuff. So that goes a long way in business and other things.
And while you think about doing updates too, you also want to remember that when you get a little older, Jeff, and you look back in life, you don't want to think about how much time you've spent watching a little bar go across a screen.
You got that right. All right, so let's go ahead and take a little break, and then we'll come back into our main topic, which we're going to probably go all over the place. But I think with the dynamic that we have here, I think we'll have some good conversation and some good ideas that will come out of this that hopefully everybody will be able to learn from. Right now, I'd like you to join us for the annual 2020 TechCon Unplugged, bringing the community together. Get away from your business for a weekend of learning, fun, and some new relationships in a getaway retreat. Join like-minded business owners to help your IT business thrive. Hear from experts and get one-on-one time with peers facing the same challenges you are. Walk away with concrete action items to take your business to the next level. It is September 25th through the 27th, 2020 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Yep, we're going back to Grand Rapids because we had such a good time the first time. You can go to techconunplugged.com. Tickets are $199. It's very inexpensive. Hotel rooms are $115 a night. Again, very inexpensive, and a time to get away from your business and be able to get a reset, talk with people, hang out, and just kind of relax in a good quality atmosphere. And again, techconunplugged.com. Go get your tickets today. All right. So main topic, we're going to talk about basically how can you adapt to the ever-changing trends in the marketplace. And man, there are a lot of trends that are changing consistently. You know, we think about things like Moore's Law, and we think about where computers have come from way back when to now. And when I say way back when, even in the last 10 years, 20 years, it's been a short period of time where things have just, they've basically doubled every 18 months. And now we're kind of getting to that point, I think personally, hardware-wise, where we've kind of, in my opinion, we've kind of plateaued a little bit. Stuff's good enough for the things that we do out there, and it works for us. But when it comes to business trends and the things that we do in our businesses and how we have to adapt, because we've all seen it where businesses will go out of business after being in business for a short period of time. Now, we've seen other businesses where they go on for long periods of time, but they never change. And maybe they fizzle out, 15, 20 years down the road. But now it's like things seem to be changing all the time. We've got companies being acquired. We've got all kinds of security problems that are out there today. But I want to ask you guys, and I don't care who we start with. Rich, actually, since you're the guy that has all the numbers and things in your head of what's going out there. And you seemed on your show to make a lot of predictions. So what types of trends stick out most to you today that are like ever changing moving forward?
Well, I mean, the biggest trends are the ones that have been going on. I mean, the first ones I'll cite will not be big surprises to anyone in the audience, right? Which is the continued rise and maturity of managed services and of cloud computing. I mean, those continue to define the industry. We talk a lot at ChannelPro about channel convergence, which is another ongoing trend in the industry where IT services and telecom services and print services and AV, so all these different kinds of channels that were and still for the most part are separate. They're starting to kind of come together. And, if you are exclusive in one of those silos, this could eventually become a problem for you. And then there are the sort of longer term trends in terms of things like the Internet of Things becoming a bigger issue out there. The rise of larger IT providers in the managed services world, especially, but also beyond the consolidation maybe isn't the right word for it, but just the appearance of companies with a regional or even a national footprint, and some of the competitive issues that's going to pose for somebody who is really just working in a very local kind of market. So, I mean, from a big picture standpoint, those are the ones that sort of leap immediately to mind, just in terms of big trends right now.
Now, yeah, I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, it sucks to getting old.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
Well, he spoke about some of the business trends. I'd be more than happy to speak about some of the hardware trends.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about it, because I already made my thoughts on that. What are your thoughts, Matt?
So the interesting thing is actually, if you look at Moore's law specifically, a lot of people say, well, Moore's law is slowing down because computer performance has plateaued, and there is segments of computer hardware that have plateaued. But the interesting thing is, I would say Moore's law is still in effect, and if not even more rapid of a cycle than 18 months. But compute power is becoming very specialized. Right. So you have a lot of focus, not necessarily on desktop performance, which I agree we're in a good spot right now. I think we could still use a little bit better battery life at the mobile end of that.
Oh,
but
yes.
if you look at compute specialization for things like AI, where they're building dedicated processors to do very, very specific tasks like artificial intelligence, like GPU GPU compute power, 3D rendering power for things like blockchain and BitTorrent, those are on an even more rapid cycle of performance enhancement than even what Moore's law would probably say is the 18-month cycle. You know what I mean? So I definitely see a lot of trends in hardware that direction, but I see it definitely going more in a specialized way right now, where we're not using the types of things maybe every day in our business that we see it.
And what's interesting, in particular about the AI processor trend you're talking about there is, I mean, obviously all of the big names everyone is familiar with, they're all kind of working on their AI strategy, but there are tons and tons of these little companies, you've never heard of before. And the names are not the slightest bit familiar that are doing this too. And it'll sort of be interesting to see how much kind of democratization there, is in the processor space. As the demand for these more specialized products increases. Do those companies get gobbled up by the NVIDIAs and Intels of the world, or are there just a lot more chip makers out there a few years from now?
Now, Matt, I will tell you that the only reason they're really building AI is to kill us. I'm just saying.
Well, we all know Skynet is inevitable, right? It's but what's funny is will that happen because and I'm going to take a little segue here, because I actually had a very similar discussion with a buddy of mine who we recently just watched all of the Terminator movies. And if you notice, it was in one of the worst ones, Terminator 3. It wasn't necessarily the fact that Skynet needed that super processor that they destroyed in the second one. All they needed was a global network of processing power in order for that to propagate. Right, and that's the other trend in hardware and performance too, is that you don't necessarily look for a single box now to be the most powerful thing. You're looking to distribute that workload on over hundreds and hundreds of thousands of nodes. So processing is kind of being grown this direction, not necessarily inside one box.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because I think you're right. It's getting that all that computing power that we have available to us in order to do the things that we really want to do. And if you think about the internet, and Rich talked a little bit about Internet of Things, and obviously that's definitely a problem when it comes to security and stuff like that. And we're having to figure out how in the world we are going to protect ourselves, protect our customers, at the end of the day. I was going to go back to, so Rich, back to your first comments about the, kind of businesses coming together and kind of melding themselves and becoming the purveyor of all things IT. part of me still goes back to, and tell me if I'm wrong. I won't believe you, but you can tell me I'm wrong. So if you have, I've seen a lot of products that will be good, really, really good at one thing. And then what happens is in the marketplace, because they want to be all things, they want to be the single pane in the glass. They want to be, you go here for everything. And because of that, they're going to expand what they do. And the problem is a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times you see where it's like a part of their products that they bring out after the one really good thing that they do, they're okay. They're, middle of the road. They're not really great. And so how do you get outside of that? How do you fix that so that when you're making a product, you kind of stay in your lane, I guess is what I'm looking at, and do the thing that you're good at, and maybe partner with other people that are good at things that can help you enhance your business and kind of making a team that can grow together of multiple type businesses.
And that was really going to be my answer, basically, because you're absolutely right. So there is, first of all, the danger that in your zeal to provide voice services to your customers, you can add that to your business but not be very good at it, and this can be a problem. But even if you do it well, I mean, it's very expensive, obviously, and so. Most of the people I talk to who are trying to be all things technology to their customers do a lot of partnering with partners. And you've got to be, there are a lot of things to be cautious about there in terms of who you're partnering with, and not just, are those people trustworthy, but do you have the same sort of culture, the same values? Are they going to serve your customers as well as you would serve them? But I mean, I think the best answer to that danger that you're raising there, that you're going to be mediocre at a lot of things and maybe good at only one, is to find people who are really good at these other tech functions, and partner with them, and you become, in a sense, almost like a general contractor to your customers. They're single point of contact in terms of anything technology related, but the services in a lot of cases are being provided by other people who already have the skills and the knowledge and the staff, et cetera.
I like how you put that. And Rich, I'm going to give you credit the first time I used the general contractor analogy, and after that, it's mine.
Okay.
So Matt, what do you think about that as far as, do you see the same types of things with companies trying to maybe bite off more than they can chew?
I do, but I think sometimes people go around this the wrong way, is that you can partner with other companies and you can bite off more than you can chew and try to do it yourself. But with modern day distributors, I don't see why you would worry about offering everything to everybody, because you can always just partner with your distributor in order to resell that product or service, and they can install it, they can deal with it, they can support it, and you just give them a little bit bigger cut of the pie. So it comes down to customer expectation, right? Does the customer expect you to be able to provide security and IoT and artificial intelligence? We talked about those three things, right? You have a customer that has a big workload, so they expect you to know Azure, they expect you to know AWS, they expect you to understand AI, where you may not. But that's where I think you can partner with other companies who can do it if you want to mitigate the risk and you trust them. Or I would just, if it were me, I would just go through a distributor and do it that way.
Well, I think a lot of us we had this this handyman mentality. I mean, if you get into this business, a lot of times you come from a standpoint of, hey, I can do this stuff. I can fix the sink. I can, fix the dryer when it dies. I can fix computers. I can do all these different things. But at the end of the day, it's like, if I can get somebody that's more efficient, like I'll give you a prime example. This is a real world scenario. I can mud and paint, or tape and mud drywall. No problem. Problem is, it will take me weeks to do it. I can hire a guy or a team to come in, and usually these people are so good because they do it all the time. They get it done in a day. And so part of our problem is, and I say this a lot, but we're cheap. We complain about our customers being cheap, but that's not the real issue. A lot of times we're cheap when we want to, sometimes you need to spend a little bit of money in order to get that type of service and keep the the relationships with the companies that you're using and have that relationship that goes back and forth. So it's not just one's giving and one's taking. It's a give and take constantly. And I think that would go a long way, because even back in the day, if you think about companies, I don't know, Ford, GM, Chrysler, that used to use certain distributors or certain, mom and pop shops to build their parts or whatever. And they had these relationships where they could go back in and they go, hey, I need help with this. They were like, hey, no problem. We'll adjust it. We'll fix it. We'll do whatever. But nowadays it's like, hey, we're just going to go to the lowest bidder. And so when you do that, a lot of times they'll say, hey, we need this change because it's not going to work. Yeah, you're going to have to pay for that. So there's a lot of relationships. It's hard. And I think this industry, I think it does a pretty good job of trying to build those relationships with the customer base. And, obviously the people that are in the technology field are trying to help their customers do the things that they need to do. And at the end of the day, they really need to pay for certain services that we need to provide to them. And I think that's where it's kind of hard sometimes to get that, kind of get that whole thing working together, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. You started with the question, are we trying to offer too much? I wonder if, and maybe Rich, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, but it seems like what we've spoken a lot about lately is not that we're trying to do too much or offer too much. We're trying to make offers to too many different types of businesses, right? So maybe specialization into specific types of customers seems more of the roadblock to success than trying to offer too many things. What do you think about that, Rich?
Well, I certainly think, when we look at the attributes that the fastest growing companies out there in our audience have in common, it often comes down to what I'll sometimes call the 3 S's. And that's standardization, scalability. So building the ability to scale processes into those processes from the get-go instead of having to figure that out later on. And standardization obviously is just standardizing on the tools that you use, the vendors and platforms you're going to support. And then the third is specialization. That's the third of the 3 S's there. And I mean, the companies that really are on the fastest growth arc tend to be the ones that have decided, I'm going to focus on customers in this vertical industry, or I'm going to focus on this particular technology. And it could be, security, it could be CRM, something like that. But instead of trying to be all things to all people, I'm going to get really, really good at this one thing. I'm going to be the go-to source on that. And because I know more about it than anyone else, my margins are going to be better. And I'm going to be able to really kind of concentrate all my resources in terms of where I'm investing on training and tools and all that kind of stuff in this one area. So, I mean, it's certainly something that has been an important ingredient to success for a lot of folks out there.
That's funny. This is from my normal co-host. Paco LeBron says, you're right. He says, be frugal, not cheap.
So true. So true.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and it's hard to get through. So I believe in paying for services, and as long as the service is going to serve me and what I need to get done. And I've said this, and a lot of people out there will disagree with me, and I get this. But I told this to my friend Paco a long time ago, and I said, listen, let's be honest. In my opinion, from what I've seen over the years, if you can get 70% out of a product or service or an employee, I said, you're doing pretty darn good, to be honest with you, in this day and age. I mean, it is what it is. And so not everything's going to be perfect, and companies will go through growing pains. And instead of, a lot of times, businesses will go to like I said, the lowest bidder, or they'll go to another company to save a few cents instead of staying with the company that they started with, or the one that's maybe growing and changing. And yeah, they've gone through some hiccups. Now there becomes a point where if somebody's crashing 900 endpoints on a consistent basis, or, every couple of months or whatever, maybe then you need to look at a different product that's not going to do that. But for the most part, you're going to have little hiccups along the way. Software is hard. It's not easy to do. If it was, I'd be writing software. Apparently I'm not. I can't even barely program an Arduino chip. So, there's that. following the directions out of a book, going, yeah, this code compiler keeps saying there's something wrong. I don't know what's wrong. Anyway. One of the classes that I'm actually taking my kids, my two youngest kids, my 15-year-old and 13-year-old. We're actually going through the beginner Arduino programming and all that kind of stuff, and building circuit boards on a breadboard and all that kind of stuff. And we're learning a lot about electricity, how things flow, and it's a common sense approach. But man, it really reminds me of old basic code. I remember writing on a TI, TI 99 computer, and this was back in the 80s. I was writing a video game out of some magazine back then, and it was a rocket ship or something like that. And I remember you get through this code, and you're writing this code in BASIC, and you lose power, or the computer would shut off, or whatever. And something would happen, you're like going, and it was gone. And you had to go back and start over again. And anyways.
You are making me nostalgic, because my same time frame, my very first computer was a Commodore VIC-20, and I used to write games in BASIC there, and the only storage medium I had was a cassette deck. So I saved all that stuff on just ordinary cassette tapes, and those are not the most reliable storage. so especially if you're updating it all the time and saving, retrieving, and so sometimes that stuff just disappeared.
I remember we had on the TI 99, we had like an old style tape recorder, like the ones that a private investigator would have sitting on their desk or whatever. You know what I'm talking about. And so my uncle had actually made up some cables that would go into the TI 99. And I remember the game I played, it was King's Quest, which was just a word-based game. You're like, hey, which way do you want to go? I want to go down the hallway or whatever. I want to turn right. I want to go through the door. I want to pull my sword out, whatever it was. And it was funny because, it would save everything to that thing. But it also, I remember this thing loading up, and it was so slow. Nowadays.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was looking behind me because I have a boxed set of the King's Quest games.
Oh,
somewhere,
no kidding.
But I don't have it on my bookshelf behind me. I do have another Sierra franchise if you want me to pull something out from the museum on your show.
Oh,
because we don't get to talk a lot about software on mine. All right, so everybody, I'm going to grab this. Hang on. And
he's picking something from the shelf for those that aren't watching live.
All right. So what I old Sierra franchise, I've got good old Leisure Suit Larry, box Sierra set 1 through, what is this one? 1 through 6 was in here, except for the number 4 that never actually existed right there. Did you ever play those? Did you ever play those games?
I've never played those. Now, did you play through all those?
I've played. I don't want to say I've got all the way through 3 and 5 because I found them kind of boring. But I played through 1 and 2, and Love for Sale was one of my favorites. I think that was 7, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But that one was hilarious.
Who exactly is Leisure Suit Larry?
He's a man looking for love, Rich. he's looking for a little action in all the wrong places. So come on, people in the chat, come on, you know what I'm talking about, right? Any of you in the chat ever played Leisure Suit Larry games? Especially Love for Sale. That was my favorite one.
Yeah, it's funny because I never did. Those types of games just never appealed to me. I don't know.
Well, it's done in the same style of King's Quest. It's just the material is a lot raunchier. Yep. But there's some really funny stuff. Paco's like, oh yeah. Yeah, there's some pretty non appropriate things. So
oh, very cool. All right, so I guess we went on a tangent, which if you guys ever listen to Channel Pro Weekly, this happens all the time.
It's pretty normal.
Anyways, so going back to talking about business, talking about different things, basically how do people, what are some steps maybe that people can take to adapt themselves to the ever-changing market? You guys have any tips, any things that you're like, hey, here's what people are doing to keep up with the times and be able to grow and expand their business? Maybe not the same that everybody else does, but in a fashion that's going to fit each individual person.
It's interesting. I want to say in 2018, maybe 2017, we had a story in Channel Pro that we called the Channel Pro Fountain of Youth. And the inspiration for that is I was just kind of thinking to myself, because on a regular basis, I'll meet people who have been in the industry 20, 25 years. And you think about how much change has occurred over that time. It's like, what is it that has enabled these people to be successful in all these different eras of IT? And I should say, I'm writing a story now for the March issue of Channel Pro about Microsoft Small Business Server, which I think a lot of people didn't notice. Last month in January, on the exact same day that Windows 7 went EOL, the very last product from Microsoft called Small Business Server also went EOL. So the SBS era sort of officially ended last month. And that's a story where, there was this entire channel built around that product. And a lot of those people have adapted to change. And some of them just didn't. They sold the business, they retired, whatever. That was the model that they knew. And they just really weren't either interested in changing or able to change. I think the thing that, and it's not going to come as a huge shock, but the people who do adapt and remain successful despite all the change in the industry are the lifelong learners, if you will, the people who are continually trying to keep up with what's happening in the industry, what their peers are doing, what's coming down the road. And making sure that they understand that, both so that they can keep their business up to speed with what's happening, but also so that they can bring these new technologies and capabilities to their customers. But that involves, and this goes back to your event, Jeff, and you were talking about taking a little time away from the business, getting together face to face with some people. It's an investment of time and energy to do this. You've got to make the time to go to events. You've got to make the time to be an active member of organizations like CompTIA, say that, they put a lot of money and a lot of time and effort into keeping their members apprised of what's coming next in the industry. So it's not an easy thing to sort of stay on top of what's going to be coming next. But the companies, I think, that make it 20, 25 years and beyond are the ones that just build that into the culture of how they run the business. And, so they are both willing and able to keep up with those changes as they're going and make it a point not to be surprised by them.
Very good. Yeah, I think you always need to be learning. And we used to have a co-host that used to say that all the time, always be learning. And I think that's one of the things and you said that earlier, Rich, is that you always have to be, if you're not learning, and I say it like this, if you're not moving forward, a lot of people go, hey, I'm standing still. And the reality is you're not moving forward. You're automatically moving backwards. That's just the way it works. Whether you like it or not, it doesn't matter, but you always have to be educating yourself and getting a understanding. And one of the other things too, is a lot of times I tell people you need to eat your own dog food. In other words, whatever you're selling to your customers, you want to be utilizing yourself in your own business, so that it like the back of your hand. And when you have problems, you can go out there and take care of those problems in a short period of time, versus a lot of people are, again, jumping all over the place.
That's great advice. If you're not using the things that you sell hands-on, you absolutely can't support them in the way that is very real or realistic. But I also want to go back to something that you and both Rich said too. There's a mentality that goes with lifelong learning that a lot of people don't have or don't realize, that the second you proclaim yourself to be an expert in something is the day that you'll eventually not be an expert in something. And a lot of people use that as an excuse and say, well, hey, I learned it, I'm good. But in technology, there's no such thing as being an expert, because everything that I know about technology that I learned 10 years ago is practically useless today. So you always have to be not only learning, but having a mindset that accepts the fact that you're never going to get to that spot where, like, yep, I got it figured out, I know it all. You always need to be ready to move on to the next big thing and be adept to change. Change is a big thing in technology.
Well, as everybody on this show knows, our friend John Dubinsky always says, the one thing I know for sure is I don't know everything.
Yeah. There's another old proverb too. Knowing that you know nothing is the beginning of enlightenment, right?
There you go.
So yeah.
What were you going to say, Rich?
Well, no, I was just going to say that. I mean, that is what you're talking about there, Matt. That is a mindset and an important one. That kind of humility, basically, I think is another one of those ingredients that goes into having a business that succeeds for a long time.
And I think sometimes you have to surround yourself with, and I think if you think about things like, we're not going to get into politics, but if you think about governments in themselves, a smart president is going to surround themselves with knowledgeable people in their area of expertise, because obviously one person cannot know everything there is to know about military, foreign affairs, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it's the same here. You have to surround yourself with people that are going to be able to help you and give you guidance. And you know what? It was said to me the other day, and this is I've known this for a long time, but it kind of just reiterated to me. My job really, when I'm teaching somebody to do something, is to make that person actually better than me. And so that they can go out and do what they need to do, and then they can pass that information on. It's never to keep somebody down or not help somebody out. And I think that's why there's a lot of podcasts out there like this and like what you guys do to share the information. You've had a lot of great guests on there that talk about their businesses, talk about real things and stuff that they do. And, a lot of good insight into, trends. I can't remember who it was. It was a few episodes back, but one of your guests had basically said he couldn't believe that he was still having to teach people about managed services all these years later. You would have thought everybody would have grabbed on, and I have my own different opinions on that. Managed services are great, and I think everybody needs to be in the portfolio for sure. But I also think that there's other ways that you can also actually, I know people right now that make good money just doing 100% residential, believe it or not. So it's like, hey, if you can make a living and you enjoy what you're doing, I don't see any problem with that. But yeah, as far as recurring revenue and stuff like that, that's definitely the trends. And it's a lot of people are looking at it as something that's, I don't know, kind of woo-woo out there. It's like, woo, managed services. It's like, this has been around. Managed services, really, we could probably go back to biblical times in the beginning of time, and there was some sort of managed service back then. I don't know what it was, but I'm sure there was. And so it's something that you need to think about when you're, thinking about your business.
So what kind of managed services would have existed in biblical times, Jeff? Because I can think of some.
You know what, Matt? Since you make things up on the fly,
well, I mean, there's goat poop removal as a service. That would be GPRAAS.
Acronyms even. That's a good one.
Well, let's see. Rich, help me out here.
Camel cleaning as a service. CCAA.
CCAS, camel cleaning as a service. Oh my gosh,
that's a good one. Wow. Okay,
that's a rabbit hole. We should probably not go down any further.
Oh, so anyways, there's a lot of things that we can do to move our businesses forward. And I know we talked about when I was on your show a few episodes back that a lot of these companies are being bought up. Venture capitalists are coming in, and they're basically they're infusing money into these companies and basically making them so that they can move forward at a faster pace. I think you guys just talked about Nerdio getting $8 million or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we just had Nerdio on the show last week. Joseph Landes was on here and talking about the things that they do over there, which I didn't have any idea. The cloud is one of those things that we've heard about it for the past few years, maybe even a little bit longer. But it's like this scary place where people don't want to go. But we're getting to the point where it is changing, and we are doing cloud services with Office 365, different things like that. But now taking it to the next level and really getting your server content, workstations, and all that stuff in the cloud, it's a scary time. And like you said, Rich, earlier, a lot of people they're used to doing business a certain way. So they've continued to do it that way. And they don't want to spend the time or effort to maybe educate themselves or find somebody that knows this stuff that maybe can help them grow their business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and I guess the encouraging thing for anyone who is intimidated by that prospect of, I feel like I need to be moving into Azure or AWS or whatever it is, but I don't really know. And I mean, I personally have never kind of waded into Azure and looked around in there, but I've certainly spoken to enough people who have said, you create an account and you go into that portal and it's just mind-boggling, the number of different services and tools, and how am I ever going to learn this? I mean, there are companies like Nerdio out there. They're not the only one. There are companies out there that what they do basically for their customers is simplify that a little bit, so that it's not all that different from what you're doing today. So it kind of comes back to what we were talking about before. The key thing is, do you have the willingness to learn and to change? Because if you do, there are resources out there that can make this a less than overwhelming process. But if you don't, it's going to be an issue for you in the mid to long term, because these things like cloud computing and managed services, they sound like buzzwords and trends and so on. But I mean, these are trends that are not going away. We know that the end users out there, the customers out there, they like paying for things on a subscription basis. They're used to doing that in their private life. And this is what's driving so much of managed services, is the recurring revenue model and the predictability of that. We're seeing all the distributors and the hardware manufacturers trying to sell hardware as a service, because that's what the customers increasingly want. And they want to get more and more of their workloads in the cloud and get the efficiencies and the scalability that comes with that. So you can keep up with that. You don't, or not. You can decide not to. But that's going to be an issue for you down the road if you're just really not willing to go there at all. And then I guess the last thing I would say is, none of what we're talking about here is an all or nothing kind of proposition. So I mean, anytime you talk to somebody who really knows their way around cloud computing, they'll always tell you that the future belongs to hybrid cloud computing, right? Like, not everything is going into the public cloud. There will still be some on-prem workloads and so on. And I think that's true for a ChannelPro's business model too. That probably everybody needs to be doing some managed services, but there's still money to be made with break fix. That you can mix a number of these different things and still be successful. I think the hard proposition is to be successful over the long term, just doing the things that you were doing a few years ago.
Yeah, and that long-term outlook is going to change a lot too. I think for those who do a lot of desktop and computer servicing, I think they would look at something like Windows Virtual Desktop as a gigantic threat to their business, an existential threat to their business, because that has the potential to not only completely reduce the cost of desktops to these little tiny things, but move the need to really have a lot of servicing on it. So it would behoove many to look at Azure and cloud and things like the virtualization and of desktop in particular, to have a plan going forward of what to sell and how to sell it.
And I would say it's a use by use scenario too, because I've got a good friend, Anthony Remus, who actually, he basically builds desktop computers, high-end desktop computers for architects, people that are doing, high-end stuff. Well, he just started actually building laptops, and the demand for those is almost immediately gone through the roof, because now somebody can have a powerful computing system, and I can't remember the platform that he's using, but he's put these things together. He laps the chips and all that all that crazy stuff, and he gets these things for people being able to do CAD and all that kind of stuff on a more mobile basis instead of having a desktop. He does a really good business with, and this is all he does for his business. He does a really good business with the desktops, but as people are moving forward, people want to get that mobile solution. Hey, I want something I can move around, even if it's just inside the shop where you're at, instead of having a desktop that's like tied to a certain spot. Mobility to a certain extent does help in some of those cases. So just different trends,
it does, yeah. Well, and there's still a great future for specialized computing and computers and desktop and workstation in particular. But look 25 years down the road, as GPU resources in the cloud become significantly cheaper, does building and maintaining a $3,000 workstation make sense, right? Or does having all that stuff done in the cloud make sense?
Okay, so Matt, for me, yes, building a $3,000 computer like every 3 years, that is a must for me. So that is what I will continue to do.
Well, for you, but you got to look at your customers too and say, where does the cutoff points, and does all becomes when does the convenience and cost outweigh the what we were doing, right? So desktop is heading that way at a rapid pace. Workstations will eventually get there.
You know what's funny? I remember, and this was, I don't know how many years ago this was, but I had built a $2,000 computer. A person brought their computer in and they had this problem where they were, I don't know, they did day trading or something like that. And they had 4 monitors set up. And I think they were like 22-inch monitors, nothing real big or anything. But the mouse lag that they had on this computer with a beefy GPU, and it had, I think it was a Core i7 920 at the time, which was a great processor in the day. I actually had to build them a brand new $2,000 computer. And I think the only thing we kept was their video card. They had some sort of, I can't remember what it was, a Radeon card. It was an expensive card. Anyways, $2,000 plus that card. So you're looking at probably, it was probably $2,500 back then for this particular machine, all because he had mouse lag.
Mouse lag
for the because what happens is I guess when you're doing the trading, when you start putting in your own code to check for certain things and do certain things, it really slows the processes down. Even on a Core i7 920, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, wow. So yeah, there's those weird scenarios that you run into every once in a while.
Yeah, wow. For those in the chat, what is the CPU utilization of the mouse? Like that, it seems like that's not a very high performance part of the subsystem there, but
you wouldn't think so. But I think it had more to do with how the mouse was interacting with the software itself. So
interesting.
Yeah, very weird. Anyways, all right. So obviously, we've talked about a lot of things as far as adapting, overcoming, different ways you can do business, different things to think about. Now, in your guys, with the people you interview and the people you talk to in the businesses, and obviously all the things you do for ChannelPro Magazine, would you guys say that a lot of people that are growing and changing and moving forward, would you say that they're probably avid readers, like in general, like not just fiction readers, but actually learning type readers?
I absolutely would. Yeah. And they're reading broadly. Basically, they're looking for as many different sources of information as they can find, and a variety. So it's publications like ChannelPro, but blogs and bloggers and peers and wherever they can get it, basically. And again, a lot of this comes down to being willing and able to carve out the time, because we're all kind of putting out fires all day and so on. So I mean, it takes time to do this. I absolutely find that the sort of pace setters in the industry among MSPs and VARs and system builders, et cetera, are the people who are just voracious about finding as much information from as many different places and chiefly through reading. Yeah.
Good networkers too. Those who network well and make friends and join peer groups also tend to do really well, staying ahead of the trend curve.
And I think too, most of the people that have gotten in this business, what I've seen over the last 20 years anyways, is that people are generally friendly and want to share information. I think that's what we're all here for. And I think that's, for the most part, that's just the way people are. So if you're not a jerk, people will generally help you. Oh. All right, let's take another quick break. Any lasting thoughts before we'll get to the end of the show? I'm going to take a quick break. If you guys got any lasting thoughts you want to bring up before we end out, I did not realize, again, we're having so much fun. The time is just flying by. It's like, holy cow, where did it go? But anyways, if you'd like to support this show, I would encourage you to go to patreon.com/MSP Unplugged. And I want to thank all of our Patreon supporters for your continued support. What that does get you is that gets you into the secret, super secret Facebook group, except they don't call it secret anymore. They call it private or something. I don't know. It's the same thing. It's not out there. So you get invite only, all that type of thing. But for basically $1 a show, $4 a month, we do 4 shows a month. That will get you into the secret Facebook group. And there's a lot of good information that's traded back and forth. And we have a no jerk policy. In other words, don't answer a question with another question that has nothing to do with the thing that was being answered, because everybody knows how I love forums. Because you get down to a rabbit hole and you're like, you read 20 threads and you realize that 19 of those threads had nothing to do with the question that was originally asked. And then maybe way down, to 50 or something like that, you might get somebody that actually is nice and answers the question. And then they usually get lambasted by somebody else going, you're so stupid, you shouldn't do it that way. We don't do that. Matter of fact, if that does happen, we just kick you out of the group. Nicely, but we just kick you out. So anyways.
Thread hijackers are the worst, too.
Oh, my God.
Somebody gets a reply there, and then like everyone else dogpiles in with different questions in the same thread.
It's like, come on, guys, answer the question. But we've got some really good, I see a lot of good interactions. I see people asking questions, getting legitimate answers, and getting helped with the questions that they have on a regular basis. So that's cool, because that's something I always wanted to create, and I'm glad we were able to do that. And again, it's just by being a Patreon supporter, patreon.com/MSP Unplugged. All right. Guys, is there anything else that you can think about that people might need to think about when adapting to the marketplace, adapting their businesses to move forward? Anything we haven't covered?
Well, I mean, I'll just follow up on exactly what you were talking about there a moment ago, because it gets to a really valuable sort of habit to get into, something we've been talking about a little bit here, and to something that's really kind of a defining characteristic of the small and mid-sized business IT channel, which is this whole idea of community, and like you were saying, Jeff, generally speaking, you ask other people for thoughts, advice, insights, they'll probably share it. That's probably not, I can't say this for sure, but I don't think that's as true in every walk of life out there. I don't know. There are certainly professional associations for attorneys, but I don't know that they're all kind of looking to help each other. It's probably not the way those guys operate. But in our corner of the world, thankfully, people are generally pretty willing to help one another out. And so as a result, there are all sorts of user groups and communities and forums and, on Facebook and in real life and so on. Peer groups. Take advantage of that. Be a part of that. Contribute and learn from that. Take from that as well. There's so much of that out there, and the sad thing is somebody who doesn't take part in that because they're worried about giving away their secrets, the secret sauce or whatever. I've just never ever come across somebody who regretted getting involved in communities or peer groups or whatever it is because somebody stole some brilliant idea or something like that. I truly only hear positive feedback from folks who make time for that. So that would be another thing that I would really encourage people who aren't doing it already to think seriously about.
And I've always said that if you look at your demographic of where you live, I live in a 6x6 square mile radius in the city of Canton in Michigan, and there's 96,000 people here. 96,000 households. And so with that being said, if you look at the amount of households, I'm one guy. I can only handle so much. And matter of fact, here's the sad part today. I probably turn away more business than I actually take on just because of time. So there's always people that are around that, that can pick up the slack. And here's the other thing too. It has a lot to do with relationships with your customers. If you have a good rapport, you build a good relationship, a lot of times, man, it's a nice thing. And I've always said, I would not work with somebody that if they called me on the phone and I cringed, that's a person I need to let go.
True that. We've had plenty of people on to talk about firing the customers that cause you the most work, because isn't that always how it goes?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I also think a good business tip that we've kind of uncovered here is coming up with alternative, strange ways of offering things as a service. Because camel cleaning as a service, Rich. I'm getting the domain right now. Yeah. Then you could go all over with that. I mean, toenail clipping as a service. What else could you offer your customers, Jeff? That would just be outside of the norm. Car washing as a service, CWAAS. Think of all the things you could do for your customers now that you don't do, and you could charge them for it monthly.
I can't remember what it was, but everybody knows that I hate acronyms. I just hate it. But it's
You're the wrong business.
I know it's part of what we do. So, and I cannot remember, but we actually made up something else for MSP, and it was years ago, and you have to go back to the archives to look at one of the old podcasts. But somebody came up with something. It was very, very clever, and it was a funny play on words for MSP, and we just kind of embellished on it a little bit to make us sound even better than we weren't. Anyway, okay.
So the more as a service offerings, the better. That's where we're landing with this. Okay.
As a service. Well, it's the way it's going, and there's a lot of things we could talk about. Obviously, we didn't really touch on IoT, and we know that's a big security risk, and there's a lot of different things that are coming up about that. Maybe if I have you guys back next time, we can delve into some of those things. But Matt, could you tell us about? Obviously, you guys are doing 5 live events this year. You want to tell us a little bit about those and to tell us where they're at and what people got to do to get involved.
Absolutely. Yeah. As we're sitting here talking about different ways to get involved and stay current and learn, there are no shortage of great shows to go to where you can learn some stuff. And one of them is the ChannelPro SMB Forum that we do. We usually did 4 cities the last few years. We're actually expanding to 5 cities now. And it's a live event where we bring the magazine to life for a day. We've got great sessions, and I'll have Rich touch on the sessions a little bit here in a second, but great speakers, great content. It's an all-day event. And you can learn quite a bit. And Paco's asking if Tech Jeopardy is returning. I'm glad. So actually, we this last year and this year, Paco, we did not Jeopardy, but we did Tech Trends Feud. So it's Family Feud. So as we all know, we also like to keep the event fun, and they put me on right after lunch to kind of wake everybody back up. And I teach a little bit about hardware and technology, but I do it in a fun way the last 3 or 4 years in a kind of a game show format. This year again, we're doing a Tech Trends Feud because we're going to 5 new cities. Dallas is our first stop in March. In fact, March 6th coming up here very, very soon. We're going to Washington, D.C. in early May. We're going to Raleigh, North Carolina. The first time we've been to Raleigh, North Carolina this year. So that's going to be in July, right, Rich?
Yep.
And after that, we're going to
Boston in September.
And then City of Industry, Los Angeles area in November. So a packed schedule for us this year. If you live in any of those areas, Jeff will tell you it is a show well worth your time to attend. Rich, tell them what they're going to learn.
Well, first, before I forget, if you want to know more about any of these events that we're talking about, go to events.channelpronetwork.com, and you'll see all the dates and locations and the whole deal. But from a content standpoint, we've got a session this year, a panel discussion about building cloud solutions. So the big difference between building cloud solutions and selling cloud products. Selling cloud products is a low margin business. Using a cloud product as the foundation for a solution is a much higher margin business, and we'll have people on stage who can tell you all about how they're doing that. We're going to go. You want to talk about a rabbit hole? We're going to talk about managed security in one of the sessions this year, and the first thing we're going to wind up talking about is defining that term, right? But that cross-section, that intersection rather, between managed services and security is a really important thing. It's going to involve a lot of partnering with partners. We've got a whole session for you on how to go about that successfully. We have got a session dedicated to the Internet of Things. We have an IT provider who's going to be on stage talking about his IoT practice. He is making a lot of money at it, and he's not doing anything all that different from what you're doing. He's just using some slightly different tools that enable him to discover all of these different devices that we all know are connected to the network. He can actually see them now. That means he can manage them now. That means he can charge for them now. He'll be talking about that a little bit. And then we've got the Tech Trends game show and a peer-to-peer session. So every monthly issue of our ChannelPro magazine features a peer-to-peer column where folks just like you share some business best practice that has been helpful for them. And we're going to have somebody on stage who's going to talk a little bit about vertical specialization. We're going to have somebody who is talking about hiring and retention and some of the strategies she's used to really make some headway there. And then another one who's going to be talking about sales and marketing and some experiences and techniques he uses to keep the lead generation pipeline full. So lots of that, all of that rather, and lots of other stuff. It's truly an information-packed, action-packed day. We keep things moving for you. So events.channelpronetwork.com. Check it out.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely check it out. I went, it was a few years ago when you guys were in Chicago, and I had a blast. It was a great day. I remember telling you, well, I won an Intel NUC. It was an older Core i5, and I'm still using that as my remote computer today for remoting into customers' machines. So
That's awesome.
it's still going. It's still going strong all these years later. But yeah, just seeing the all the tech stuff, and obviously you guys always bring in great speakers with relevant topics to what's happening right now and what people need to be thinking about. So that's awesome. I tell you what, I think that other than that, I think we've covered everything. But Matt, if people wanted to find out more about you and where you're at and how to get a hold of you, where would they go?
ChannelProNetwork.com is our website. Set it as your homepage, or at least one of the pages that you open up and go to it every day. There's articles, news, resources, white papers, downloads, all kinds of stuff that for you to learn and stay ahead of the trends each and every day. So that is where you want to go. If you want to find us on the social medias, we're Channel Pro Network on Facebook and LinkedIn. We're at Channel Pro SMB on Twitter. I'm Matt Whitlock on Twitter. Rich is at Rich Free. And if you want to check out Channel Pro Weekly, we'd love to have you as a listener or a viewer. Go to just go to channelpronetwork.com. You can find it there on one of the show notes pages, and we're on iTunes and Stitcher and Google Podcasts, and we're on Spotify now, Jeff. Finally, after long last. So if you're a Spotify user, you can find us there too. And of course, we're on YouTube. You can subscribe to us there, and we'd love to have you.
Very cool. Good to have you guys. Rich, anything to add to that? Or he kind of covered everything, didn't he?
I think he did.
Yeah, I stole his Twitter thunder. I gave his handle for him.
Well, it was great having you guys on again, and we had a great time. And I'll tell you what, I'm telling you, time just flew by, and it's like we're over an hour. Dang it. Because I've been trying to shorten the show, and it just depends on the guest. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't.
Rich and I could go another 45 minutes, no problem, as most people would know. But Jeff, thank you so much for having us on. It's great being on your program, and I know I hope it's going well for you since you kind of re-kicked it off. And I know we'd love to have you back on our show as well.
All right, awesome. We will definitely set that up. All right, come join us live every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can watch live and hang out in the chat room over on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. You can also subscribe using your favorite podcatcher so you never miss an episode. Thank you for subscribing to the show, and we'll see you next time on MSP Unplugged.